Great, hi everyone. Oh, it works, good. Okay, I was worried about that. Thank you so much for joining us, both in person and online, at the Portobello Bookshop. So I'm Rebecca Wojturska, I'm the Managing Director of Haunt Publishing, and I have the huge honour of chatting with Heather Parry, and a clap because I said her name. So I'm going to start just by reading out a little bit about Heather, so you can all see why she is so amazing, and why I'm her #1 fan. Not in like the creepy Stephen King's Misery kind of way, but maybe actually. We'll find out. So Heather Parry was born in Rotherham. I'm from Sheffield, so that is one of the reasons why, why you're great.
Only the best.
Yeah, and lives in Glasgow. She has won the Bridge Award for an Emerging Writer, Cove Park's Emerging Writer Residency, and the Laxfield Literary Launch Prize. That was quite a mouthful. I like that.
Sorry about that.
In 2021, she was a Hawthornden Fellow. This is her first novel. So, the novel being Orpheus Builds a Girl, and it is literally come out today, so today's publication day. And again, a round of applause, because that's amazing. So I promise I won't make you clap every time I say something.
Let's do that.
That's the last one for now, I promise. So before we get started, I'm just going to say a little bit about the book that we're about to discuss. So Wilhelm von Tore is dying. As he looks back on his life, he reflects on his upbringing in Dresden, his beloved grandmother, and his medical career during the Second World War. But mostly, he remembers his darling Luci, the great love of his life, his dark-haired beauty promised to him in a dream years before they met. Though only together for a few months in her first life, their love is written in the stars. Using scientific research compiled over decades, Wilhelm ensures that, for him and his beloved, death is only the beginning. But through the cracks in Wilhelm's story, there is another voice, that of Gabriella, and she will not let this version of events go unchallenged. She tells the story of her sister Luciana, fearless and full of life, and the madman who robbed her from her grave. So it's no secret, as I've made clear so far already, that Heather is one of my favourite writers. So I have some questions, and I have wrote these purely to feed my own curiosity, but hopefully you all will get something out of it as well. So for those in the audience who don't know, the book is based on the true life of Elena Milagro de Hoyos. So I was wondering, could you tell us kind of just about this and what kind of drew you to these, frankly, quite horrific events?
Yes, you can, and thank you for your really, really nice intro. I do have to say for a second, hello Mom, hello Dad, because they're watching from Sheffield, and hi, yes, you're very proud. My mom's humming with pride right now. So Elena Milagro de Hoyos is the real name of the real person that Luciana is based on. And I heard this story, the real story, for the first time in maybe 2016, 2017. And has anyone ever heard This American Life? Yeah, Eva, just is nodding away there, yes. It was like quite a short segment on an episode of This American Life. And it really happened in Florida, in Key West in Florida in the 1920s. And they were talking about the real story, and then they were speaking to some of the people from that area who were saying things like, oh, well, yeah, he just really loved her. You know, like, oh my God, I wish someone would love me that much. And, you know, I don't want to give away the entire plot, but it's like not good. And I was kind of like, that's really interesting because that is the polar opposite to what I consider love to be. And they also do like tours around this area of like, you know, a tale of undying love. And I just feel like greatly like offended by that idea, really. So I was stood in my kitchen and I listened to it and then I listened to it again and I listened to it a third time and was kind of like, I can feel I'm becoming obsessed. Because it just felt so wrong. And also, you know, the original story is it obviously really happened and it's horrifying because of that, but it is also really gothic-y. You know, it has so many of the elements of like a great gothic fiction. And I just really couldn't get this out of my head. Like, I don't know how other writers are. I know there's a lot of other writers in the room, but I kind of have an idea and it kind of sits in the kind of little like treasure chest of, you know, kind of lurking at the back here. And then as you go about the world, you kind of magpie things. So you see a little fact that will kind of fit into the narrative that you're trying to build and you go, oh, I'll have that. Or you think, you're sitting on a bus one day and you go, oh shit, I've had a thing. Sorry for swearing. I've had a note, and then you go, okay, this could work, and I could move it, and I could pull it this way, and this is how we could talk about this issue, and you see the kind of nub of the idea sprawl out into a novel. And yes, I think it was like, kind of like discussed at not even what had happened, but like how it was being framed and what that meant for like, your concept of like women in society, but also the kind of excusing of terrible things, and being a goth.
Yeah.
It really fed into my general sensibilities as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because you kind of touched on kind of retelling, because you've heard this, which is based on this, and you're kind of retelling that. And it's a theme that's really prominent, both in the title and the story. So I was wondering, like, basically, when it comes to retelling something, how do you go about that? Because the book has alternating chapters, as we mentioned, between the sister and between Wilhelm. And usually when we're retelling things, whether it's history, it's from the side of the powerful. So how prominent was that in your thinking when you were kind of compiling the chapters?
Yeah, that was very important. I mean, you are always hearing things from someone's perspective all the time, right? So we all know this from the times we live in. You can't take something from one source. You must go boringly to several and then try and fit together the real thing. And that is, again, a very Gothic trope, the epistolary sort of novel, getting things from different perspectives. Has anyone heard of Dracula Daily? Yes. So I'm currently... Oh, hi, Gemma. Dracula Daily is like a Substack you can sign up to, and they will email you the content from Dracula the novel on the day that letter or diary entry was made. So if it's May the 4th, you'll get the May the 4th entry. It's a really interesting way to digest that novel, because it's completely different to how you read a book. So that was just a weird aside. It's a nice thing to email to yourself every day. But this idea of completing narratives is very Gothic-y. And it was really interesting because the first draft of this book was only Wilhelm. And, I obviously really heavily influenced by things like Lolita and The People in the Trees, where you take the perspective of like a really despicable person. And it takes a lot of trust in your reader, because you need them you need to trust them to fill in the gaps. And fill in the gaps in the right way.
In the way you want them to.
And the way you want them to, yeah. But with this story, it was like I didn't want to give that much book space over to such a heinous character. And by introducing Gabriella, I didn't want her to kind of like set the record straight. I wanted her to like problematize his narrative. So I don't want you to think that Gabriella's narrative is entirely correct, because no one's version of a story is entirely correct. When we love people, she very much loves her sister and has lost his sister, and that grief is, comes through, I hope, in the book. But she also had a perspective on who her sister was, and when you lose someone, or when you lose them from your life or whatever, you perfect them in your head, or especially if she's writing about when she was a child, you're seeing it from a child's perspective, and the child doesn't understand what's going on. The child doesn't understand what the family's pressures are under and things like this. So it was really, rather than kind of like making it neat, I wanted to make it messier a little bit, and be like, well, Luciana is essentially like an empty space at the core of this book.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is a Dracula Daily, but an Orpheus Daily.
Oh my God, Orpheus Daily, can you imagine? I didn't put dates on it. Gutted.
We can just pen them in.
We can just pen them in. Everyone bring your copies, and I'll change it now.
We're not going to sign them. We're going to pen in the dates instead.
We'll be here till like next week. It's fine.
Yeah, it's good. Fun fact, I interviewed Dacre Stoker recently, a great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker, and he was all for Dracula Daily, so family endorsed.
Yes. Nice.
But, so I feel like holding the book up every time I look at my notes, just to be like... But I had heard of Eleanor's story before, and I kind of revisited it after reading this, because I got obsessed, like you got obsessed. And it's so horrific the way she was treated, not even by Karl Tanzer, who was the inspiration for Wilhelm, but just by everyone, the police authorities, so many people, both in her life and her death. So basically, I was just like, how did you go about representing all these kind of sensitive details in her story?
Yeah, so she is, obviously, like, I've really, really highly fictionalized the narratives here. So I've shifted them in time. I've I don't know anything about Elena's family. I changed some of the facts about her life. It's very much a fictionalized thing. It's not like it's not an accurate depiction of what really happened. But one of the things that did really happen was what I referred to in my first answer, in that the community was kind of brought into it, and the sort of awful things that Wilhelm did were like really excused by the society. So, will I give away this plot point? What happens kind of like when Wilhelm is discovered, let's say, and the way that Luciana was treated after that point was real. It was really that she was kind of like, it was another layer of betrayal of her as a person, and that was for a paying audience as well. And that is very complex, isn't it? Because when you're writing about something that really happened, you're also part of that. Yeah. You're doing that same thing. This is an issue that true crime has as well. It is almost part of the sort of very difficult relationship we have with kind of true crime. So yeah, I wanted to tease that out, but I also wanted to tease out things like, the fact that these are two immigrants into America, but they have to live their lives in very different ways, and society treats them in very different ways. And the way Wilhelm sees himself as an immigrant is very different to how he sees her family. And yeah, it was a lot going on. I mean, I hope it's still there. I hope it's all there in the book.
It is.
Yeah, there's various different ways you can go with it, and I think I've tried to go a lot of different ways all at once.
It works. It comes together beautifully. I'm sure if anyone's had the chance to read it, they will agree.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's interesting about like spoilers and stuff, because this is the launch day. So maybe an event in like a month's time, you can start just
But it's also based on a real thing, so I'm sure people will have heard of it, and I don't think it's like, I feel like really weird about spoilers. I don't know how, when people are like, oh my God, no spoilers about like The Sopranos, and you're like, it's been out for 20 years.
Like, that's on you.
Like, by now. But also, I don't feel like spoilers ruin a thing for me, because the enjoyment is in it as an art form, if you will.
I was so tempted then to just drop a huge spoiler for something like massive and just be like, yeah, But no, I won't. I would love to discuss the title though.
Yes.
As much as you are comfortable with giving away. So kind of what drew you to the myth of Orpheus, and how does that feed into the narrative of the book?
So I'm really bad at titling things. So I am really lucky to have an amazing workshop group that includes Camilla Gradova and Kirsty Logan and Heather Parry, who sat right there, who are brilliant writers. And it's, for me as a writer, it's really vital to have a group of people who I can trust with my work. And you really need, as a writer, to have a group of people who can say, that's not good enough, you need to throw it away. And I was really grateful for this, because they were like, oh, here's the things we love about it, here's what needs changed. But also you can't have the title, obviously, because they were just like, that's not going to work. And I went, oh, okay, I did work quite hard on the title, but okay, I'll go away. And I was like, how about this? And they were like, no, absolutely not. And I was like, okay. And I think I spent like 3 days coming up with maybe 100 different titles, and was just sending them to the WhatsApp, like, how about this? No, how about this? No, how about this? No. And they were getting to the point of being like, are you okay? Like, it can't be this hard. And then I was like, Orpheus Builds A Girl. And they were like, yes,
got it.
So I really wanted to kind of bring in a kind of mythical element, because obviously Wilhelm is mythical to himself. Like the whole idea, I'm really obsessed with the idea of self-deception, and that is from being a recovering philosophy student. Not even that recovering, to be honest. The idea that like the way we lie to ourselves, and the fundamental sort of human nature element of that, although human nature implies a God, which we don't do, sorry, this is a very existentialist. And his self-deception is like such a central part of the book, and it comes up in everything I write, I think. So the title does refer to the Orpheus myth, and the way he went back into Hades to rescue Eurydice. And is that how you say her name?
Oh, I'm the wrong person.
Eurydice, anyone classical? Thank you.
Oh, God nods.
And the Orpheus myth is that he goes into Hades and saves Eurydice, and they just say, you can take her, but don't look back. If you look back, she'll stay in Hades. And he goes over the sort of threshold and looks back, but she is still in Hades. So then she's taken down to Hades and dies forever. And I really wanted that, obviously, with the plot of the book. That's very relevant. But I also wanted to be like, that is how he sees himself. I don't want that to be how we see him. I want us to see him seeing himself as that, if that makes sense. And yeah, I'm really glad that it works, and I like it, because, God, it was hard.
It works really well, especially with the cover. It's so beautiful.
Can I just shout out to this cover? Shout out to Isabel, who's basically sorted this cover out, because it really is beautiful.
I am going to have to ask, what were some of the other titles? Do you remember any of them?
Oh, God. I mean, one of them was like, I shouldn't say this, is really unprofessional. One of them was like basically taken from the epigraph is from Middlesex by Geoffrey Eugenides. And the epigraph is, so do boys and men announce their intentions. They cover you like a sarcophagus lid and call it love. And the original title was a small part of that. I'm not going to say which bit. But it was a sarcophagus lid. I mean, we'll never know.
Well, maybe after a few drinks after. Get it out of you. I also noticed while reading there are kind of some parallels with Frankenstein as well, with the whole kind of generating life from death. I was wondering whether that was kind of something that you were conscious of while writing, or whether it's just like a byproduct.
Yeah, so I think anyone here who writes kind of dark fiction, I'm pretty sure went through the same childhood stage, which was Goosebumps, Point Horror, Stephen King.
Yep.
So my kind of like journey into literature was very fixed in that way. And one of the things that, the next stage after that, which was hugely influential on me, was a Gothic fiction course I took in university with the writer Patricia Dunker, who was amazing. And all of that, studying Frankenstein, studying Dracula, studying like The Monk, all that really, really, really dark. Like you kind of read it now and you're like, Jesus Christ, that's dark. Like, you've kind of forgotten. That has been hugely influential on me. And Frankenstein, anytime you're talking about death, anytime you're a female writer, that comes through. But to be honest, I'm really, really interested in transhumanism. Does anyone know what transhumanism is? So it's this kind of like, if I say tech bro, if there's any tech bros in the audience, I don't mean to offend you, but the tech bro culture, kind of say. There's this idea that you can kind of technology your way out of death. And you see this a lot with anything that Elon Musk says that should not be trusted. This, or like Ray Kurzweil, when he talks about consciousness, they really think that you can technology your way to a brain. You can technology your way to a human consciousness, which I don't agree with either. They also think you can technology your way out of death. So a lot of transhumanists have like things they've implanted in their bodies. They will have like maybe an artificial leg, but the artificial leg does, technological things. And part of this is like they genuinely feel like they can cheat death. And I find this so fascinating because I feel like, one, why would you want to? Like, not to reference Queen, but who wants to live forever? God, that's painful. Why would you want to? But also, like, what is the meaning if death doesn't occur in life? These are big questions. But I just personally don't think you can or should want to cheat death, really. But they're obsessed with it, and the kind of rumor about Walt Disney having himself frozen. A lot of people have had themselves frozen. A lot of it is like quite rich, American, I don't want to say tech bros again, but tech bros. So there are kind of like warehouses of frozen bodies in like Arizona, of all places, where it couldn't be hotter. So you've got these huge like energy suck as well. Like think about the energy of that. Think about how you've got to keep these like fridges that keep people at a certain temperature and stuff. These really exist because people genuinely think at some point we'll get to the point where we can like cure them of death. Yeah. So I love that as a concept, and why, how the hell do you think that's going to work? Like not to get too deep into it, but that cryogenesis doesn't work because of like the way that your body freezes and the damage it causes to your cells. If anyone watches this back and we've like decided that cryogenesis works, I'm going to look like the biggest idiot. But as far as I am aware, speaking on whatever day this is, cryogenesis isn't going to work. But like, I love the idea of this kind of like throwing away of the concept of death and why you can't let things go. So that obviously does tie into that Gothic tradition. And that was a very meandering answer.
No, I loved it. That was great.
We were actually talking about Frankenstein today when we went on our little bookshop tour, and we were talking about like, the different ways that you understand Frankenstein when you learn more and more about Mary Shelley. Yeah. And, you know, you read it as like a teenager, or you read it as a you know, literature student, and you're like, oh, you know, it's these grand questions, and she wrote it on this like trip with Lord Byron, and oh my God. And then the more you learn about her, you know, like she, I think, had a child, and then Shelley basically couldn't be bothered with the child because the child was a sickly child and he thought it was going to live. So he just like swore off the child, and I think slept with her sister. And then you go, oh, you've written a book about like the folly of man creating things that they won't then look after. I wonder where that came from. Yeah. So it's like inherently a feminist book as well. And I hope that at least that is something I've carried over.
Oh, it absolutely is. I do feel like the tech bros will want to know, does this also serve as a boat for a brief amount of time?
That's probably a very
specific.
That's a great joke for anyone who didn't get it. Just look on Twitter.
You'll find it. So now I'm pleased to say that Heather is going to do a reading for us from the book. So over to Heather.
Thank you. Look at this. I've been color-coded. Professional.
Prepared.
I'm going to do a very short reading because everyone prefers that. So as we heard, I've got two narratives here. So I've got Gabriella's narrative and I've got Wilhelm's narrative. And they both tell the story of their life from being a child. And this is a story from earlier on in Wilhelm's narrative. And he is really, really, really close to his grandmother. And actually, for his relationship with his grandmother, I actually took a lot of inspiration from Yukio Mishima, the life of Yukio Mishima. He's a fascinating character, awful, kind of terrible fascist man. But his life, the way he related to his grandmother was really strange. So it was hugely inspired by that. So his grandmother passed away, and this is him talking about when they disinterred his grandmother's corpse. Sorry. Trigger warning?
Corpse.
There she was, the woman I loved, so similar to how she was in life. For a moment, I forgot that she had passed away and reached out for her hand as if she could reach out and take mine in turn. Her skin, dry but rubbery while she lived, had remained as such, and while desiccation had occurred, there was no visible evidence of putrefaction or excessive rot. She had dried rather than decayed. It was only then that I recalled the pictures in my grandmother's books, the monks who claimed to have transcended the very concept of death, who were rendered as artworks, as things to be worshipped for millennia. I touched her body, felt her achievement beneath me. She was glorious. It is, of course, now accepted that the surrounding environment has an enormous impact on a corpse, as does the pre-death diet and lifestyle of the decedent. You write things and then you don't think about having to read them later on, of the dead. Yet we have previously failed to understand that by treating a dead body as a spent thing, we have robbed our loved ones of any chance they have of returning to their physical form after death. For we have not just discarded it, but have in fact placed it in the worst possible conditions to delay its decomposition. Indeed, by throwing bodies into the pyre, we remove their existence on this plane entirely. And how could a soul begin to return to such a vessel? Ash cannot support life, and so these souls are destined to expire on whichever plane they exist post-death. Increasingly, it became clear to me that we are engaged as a race in a type of genocide, a grand theft, and that we steal from the recently dead any chance they might have of returning to us. We kill our dead for a second time. In this, we are all guilty.
I am going to make you all clap.
Don't clap that, that's grim.
Yeah, I absolutely love this book so much. But so I was wondering, because obviously it is quite dark, what the kind of research and writing process was like for you, because I was thinking about your search history and I was like,
I'm on a list somewhere, you know. I've said this before, but I think anyone who writes dark fiction has like the shame shelf, and it is on a list from their Google search history. Get a VPN is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's I'm very interested in the dead. Please don't screen cap that and use it when I've done something awful. It is really interesting though. Like I'm really, really just genuinely quite interested in the body. And that comes through in all my work, I think. And, you know, you don't want to kind of self-psychologize. But like when I was a kid, I had really, really severe eczema. So I had to be, my mom and dad had to like wrap me in bandages when I went to bed at night because I would like scratch like layers off my body basically. And what that means is that when you are really young, your kind of first experience of your body is that like you can't really trust it because like you don't know how you're going to wake up in the morning. You don't know like it's like the boundary of your body is a little bit compromised. I know that sounds kind of dramatic, but it was in this way that like, you know, you really take your skin for, this is also going to be screen capped. You really take your skin for granted of like the containing of it, of the containing of you. And when that's not really how you come to think of your body, it can really affect you, I think. So I really think of your body as like a situation. Like it's not permanent. You know, things can really change. It can be porous and, you know, things can happen and the very way you think of your physical self can change a lot. And that has led me to be really, really interested in like the processes of the body. And, you know, like everyone will have seen those like Instagram accounts that are like the divine feminine, you know, and they're like, oh my God, you're either a mother or a maiden. And they're like, you know, oh my God, I live by the moon and that kind of thing. You know, I live by my period. And like that's almost cool in a way because they really do appreciate one of the amazing processes of their body. But every time I see these, I'm like, why aren't we making accounts about like your spleen? Or like the way that your respiratory system works is incredible. Like what a beautiful cosmic miracle that like we're in the nihilistic universe and like look at like, my God, your skin is an organ and your, you know, your blood pumps around your body because there's a big old muscle in your chest. Like that's just so mad. Like people read nature books and they're like, look at this weird creature. And I'm like, we're weird creatures. Like, look, Jesus. So much we're going, you can make massive holes in parts of you, like really crazy. And I just find that so amazing and weird and dangerous and exciting and terrifying. And that is kind of how I've really approached the whole bodily part of this. And then you read so much about death and you read so much about change. And it all went in a way that's like, I think, quite obvious.
It's very graphic. It's right up my alley.
Do you know what? Did anyone who here is about my age or older, do you remember the kind of live autopsies on Channel 4? Yeah. Like maybe Mo, you just like horrified. There was a guy called, is he called Gunther van Hagens?
Definitely Gunther.
Yes, yeah. He did the Bodyworks exhibitions and it must have been kind of like quite a formative time for me, so like maybe around the millennium. He did 4 live autopsies on Channel 4, I believe. And one was like the reproductive system, one was the respiratory system and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sorry if this is too graphic for anyone, but I really remember him like, they took off like the skin of someone's arm and like, it's called degloving, which is horrible. They like pulled the skin off his hand and you could see like, your fat is really yellow and you see all this like really visceral stuff like, oh my God, I've never thought about it, but like under my skin, that's also existing. And that has really, you know, been hugely influential as well. I'm going to a live autopsy on Sunday.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
So apparently it's not a fully real body though, so that's.
Not fully real.
Like, yeah, they said kind of like semi-synthetic and I don't know what that means.
You'll find out.
Oh, well, yeah. Maybe it's a trap and I'll be killed.
Yeah. You're the body. You're the fresh body. Yeah, I remember that show. I remember he wore a jaunty hat, right?
Yeah. He was, again, German.
No.
Sorry to Germans in the audience. There's at least one.
Yep. You should do like an Instagram account like the spleen feminine or something like that.
The divine spleen.
The divine spleen.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Maybe the spleen's quite boring. I don't know. I've never really looked into it specifically.
Yeah, we specifically honed in on the spleen for no reason.
Oh, like your eye. My God, like...
I thought you meant mine in particular. And
your
I was like, what's wrong
eye
with
is
it?
beautiful. What a miracle. You know, just like the way that these things work is just... I'm so fascinated by it, and I don't think I'll ever stop being fascinated by it. So there's a lot more of this to come. I'm just sorry.
Good. So yeah, you kind of touched on your kind of research process, which sounds really dark and amazing. But I know we might have some writers in the audience, so I was wondering if you could touch on your writing process. I know that's a really broad question. But...
No, that's... I So like a lot of people, I'm sure, I spent several years writing the first draft of my first attempt at writing a novel. And then I was really angry at myself because I was like, what a waste of time, because you change it so much. And I like agonized over every goddamn word. And you just change it so much. I remember I wrote 100,000 words and then I cut out 40,000 words, which is, for the maths challenge, amongst you, 40%. And I was like, God, that's like, almost a full year. What a waste. So now what I do is kind of like, I think most writers kind of think a few projects in advance. So you have like, I want to do this and then I want to do this. And you have different kind of baskets in the back of your head where you go, that's vaguely what that one is. And that's vaguely what that one is. And you, again, magpie things into it all along. And now what I do, because, the vast majority of writers don't write full time. A lot of us work for a living. So I have to kind of like carve out like a 4 to 6 week period where I will try and get down a first draft. And that is quite intense. And you have to write probably 3,500 words a day. But for the way my brain works, I find it really good to just kind of dump. Sorry. In fact, the way I think of a first draft is like this is a pottery metaphor that's coming now. Mo, you can tell me if it's wrong. You need to slap down the clay that you will then make a vase out of or whatever. And you need to slap down the clay, so your first draft is like slapping down the clay, just so you've got something to work with. Similar to artists removing the white page kind of thing. So I work really quickly, really intensely, force it all out. Oh, these aren't good. Get it all out, get a kind of vague sense of what it is, and then I put it away and don't look at it for like 4 months, 6 months, whatever. And again, you're in the back of your head, you're kind of going, oh, I know that didn't quite work, and I don't really think that character should be there, or I know that this isn't right. And then I'll go back to it and I'll spend a few months picking over it, re-editing, again, put it in a drawer, coming out, re-editing, and then take it to my workshop group, who will tell me to burn it or keep going. And yeah, just keep going, doing until that, and then it's about ready to send to my agent eventually.
Yeah. All I could hear while you were talking about pottery was Unchained Melody, just like going in my head. Just like...
I wish that was the situation of me writing, but it isn't. Yeah. Just me in my little writing room.
Your writing room. I thought you said writing room.
I did. It's very pink.
Oh, it's great. Perfect. So you are known as a writer of dark fiction, and you've touched on a bit kind of what drew you to this with, eczema and everything. Was there anything else that you felt drew you to the genre, and how do you feel Orpheus sits in with your body of work of dark fiction?
Body of work, nice.
Body, I got a pun in myself.
Nice. Yeah, so, I mean, to quote my mom, she once said to me, Heather, why can't you write anything nice? And I simply don't know. I would blame them, to be honest. I think it's just been like what I've grown to love, and of literature that I really love. I love books that like force you to look at something that's awful. Like Lolita, like The People in the Trees, these kind of things. I really like work that kind of provokes you as a reader. I think that's a J.G. Ballard quote, like, I want to provoke the reader. And I don't know what that means about me. I think it's not very nice, but I can't write nice books. I don't know how people do it. Like, there's a happy ending, and I thought I wrote what was quite a nice story, and then everyone was just horrified by it. And I think that's just something, I like making people think about a thing.
Yeah.
Which, some people don't want to, and I totally appreciate that. It's hard to be alive. And yeah, I really do write about the body a lot, and, I just love the Gothic because it talks about power. So the way I think of the Gothic as a genre is it really talks about shifting powers, and it talks about, one thing is dying and then another thing is coming, and where does the power lie? But also, like, I think maybe the grotesque is a more accurate way to speak about this book, or my work in general, which is it plays in the kind of spaces between the human and the non-human, and the real and the not real, and the comedy and the tragedy, and it tries to sort of, how mycelia grow, like the underground part of a mushroom, the way it sort of reaches out into the little kind of spaces in the soil. I think that's what my work tries to do.
I love that analogy.
Thank you. I was quite impressed when I was saying it.
Your signature now when you sign books should be a little mushroom growing into like...
But they will go on for miles.
Yeah,
like, they go
great.
on for miles under. That's quite a gothy thing as well. Like, a mushroom is just the fruit. A mushroom is like the apple of the apple tree, and there's like mycelia is the real mushroom, and that can go on for like literally miles and like connect up different plants and different trees and things. There's a whole society over there, and we don't know what they're doing
Until it goes like, boop.
and then it just pops up, and you go delicious.
Yeah, yoink. Yeah, check your mushrooms before you start picking them and eating them. So I was just wondering, in terms of influences, like what kind of writers influence you, or what writers would you recommend to people to go and read? Gothic, horror, dark fiction?
Well, it really depends on your boundaries as a reader.
Mid.
Yeah.
We can go easy, medium, high.
I really think that Frankenstein and Dracula are like amazing reads now, and they will change. You'll reread them, and they'll change. Your understanding them will change quite a lot over time. I really love Hanya Yanagihara, and of course, she's not Gothic, but I think a lot of her work plays into how I understand literature. I have to also give a shout out to Camilla Gradova and Kirsty Logan and Heather Parry, who were great influences on me as friends as well as fellow writers. I mean, like, The Monk by Matthew Lewis is just so fucked up.
Yeah.
It's so dark. You know, I don't know, what's your favourite Gothic literature?
Oh, a question for me. A lot of the ones that you've been saying, like The Monk was pretty a formative one for me. I had the same path as you, like Goosebumps, Point Horror,
Stephen King, yeah.
And then went to uni and did a course on Gothic literature.
Yeah.
No
one's unique.
Yeah, no, we're all the same, really, just little creeps. But no, Jekyll and Hyde was a pretty huge one for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, Frankenstein, of course. The Monk. We're the same. This was a pointless question because I'm just giving the same answer.
We're so the same that we did not discuss this.
No.
But I'm wearing earrings with skulls on them, and she's wearing earrings with coffins on them, and they're both dangly. This is not
Together.
and we're both kind of wearing
Have a
leatherette
ribcage.
leggings and like a shirt under a.
It just works.
Yeah,
But,
you can basically read Rebecca's work if you want to read mine as well. It's just all the same.
I would recommend you because I've told you a million times you're one of my favourite writers. And Kirsty Logan and Michelle Paver also writes really good.
Jenny loves Michelle Paver, and I've never read her, but I
you
should.
Need to.
Yeah.
You need to. It'll happen. Yeah. Everyone's getting a personalised shout out before we leave. My partner Ross, everyone. But no, yeah, pretty much the same. So
There's also like a lot, like, you know, I don't want to just read out my Gothic literature thing, but like, there's a lot of unknown stuff as well. And obviously the Gothic is kind of rooted in like a, you know, it's very much like a European thing, but there's also people like really broadening out the Gothic genre. You know, like you're doing this with Haunt as well. I know you're about to bring out a queer Gothic anthology, which is brilliant because I've read it. There's things like Mexican Gothic, you know, there's people taking this and broadening it out and expanding it and bringing new perspectives to it. And I think that's really exciting. Gothic's kind of having a moment, isn't it?
It is. It's really on the rise, like film as well, film and books.
There's an amazing film called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is, I think, Iranian vampire movie, which is amazing. And Mariana Enriquez obviously doing like great things with the Gothic with her kind of new novel.
I'd compare your writing to Mariana's.
Stop it! Oh my God,
I'm just here to give
ludicrous,
compliments.
but I'm going to put it in my pocket for later.
I'll do a quote on the book, it's fine.
Again, I'll just write that on the front of everyone's book.
I should say as well, Porty they actually have the word horror on a bookshelf, which is really rare for a bookshop. So do check out, if you love dark fiction and horror, check out these cases behind us.
Right
they
here.
didn't ask me to say that either, so you're welcome. So I think we have time for some audience questions. So I can think of more if people are feeling a little shy.
I'm always the first person.
Yeah, you're ready.
Thanks, Ewan. So my question is kind of about place for it. So obviously, America, like Florida, is like the central setting for it. But also there's a relation of the family's experience in the childhood of Gabriella and Luci in Cuba. And I'm interested in what the differences between those two countries, because they're often set in opposition to each other to a degree. And what did you want those two places to feel like? And was it in opposition?
Interesting geographical, political question from David there in an unexpected turn. Yeah, so obviously we have like Wilhelm's early childhood in Germany. We have Gabriella and Luci's early childhood in Havana in Cuba, and then we have Florida in kind of the 1960s and 70s. And yeah, I really wanted to, I mean, this is literally where they were from. That was where they were really from. But I lived in Latin America for 3 years. And it's such a vibrant and beautiful place that is seen very strangely through, like, Americanized, particularly, Cuba is on like the terrorism list of America, and you can't fly from America to Cuba. You have to go by somewhere else, and that is essentially because they're very different political states, and because capitalism sees socialism as a danger. And I really wanted to. I've shifted the narrative so that the Gabriella and Luci's family leaves Cuba because of the revolution, because they believe that they're going to have a chance at better prosperity from going to America. And it's up for you to decide whether that was right or not, or whether it was the right thing to do. But that difference of capitalism and socialism is very interesting to me, and the way, it's impossible to be from the UK and look at the American medical system and not feel a genuine sense of kind of horror about that as well. So I really wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the positions that you are pushed into when you don't have access to medical care, or where the power differential has shifted, or when you are, through racial politics or through how we see different kind of immigrants and things, you are disempowered and impoverished, and I mean impoverished in all the kind of ways. So yeah, that was really important to me, and it's not something that has like easy answers to either as well. Like, essentially the kind of myth of the American dream underpins this novel. Like what does the American dream mean for different people? Who achieves it? What does it mean to achieve it? You could say that Wilhelm achieves the American dream in this novel, but I think that's pretty horrific if that's the case. But you can also kind of say that it's achieved slightly by her family as well. What do we expect from these things? And yeah, they're very important locations for me, and I really wanted to write about them as well.
I was thinking then you could call it American Nightmare, but I too am bad at titles. So that
really wouldn't help it sell in America either. So.
No, exactly. We have a question here.
I'll just go to one from the live stream, and then I'll be with you in a sec. There's a lot of love for you and your mum in the event chat, just so you know.
Kay Parry,
she is watching. And Laura says, the point horror references reminded me that I used to devour these as a child. Did you have a favourite?
Oh, yeah. So I actually have a point horror podcast with the writer Kirsty Logan, where we like reread old point horrors from our childhoods and just dissect the truly terrible gender politics and the sexual politics and the class politics and everything. Yeah, it's hard because you read them back and some of them really are very not good. And R.L. Stein in particular, that man, the effort level is truly about, like, it's what... He must have just been writing one every half hour. And fair play to him, I'm sure he's a millionaire. He does a masterclass now, so maybe we should all...
sign up.
Yeah, and see how we can become that rich. I really like one called The Perfume, which has characters called Dove and Wing. And then, yeah, I'm not going to tell you the plot of it, but I would say probably... anything by Caroline B. Cooney is also really, really good because she's trying. And there was the Cheerleader series that she did. There was Cheerleader 1, 2, and 3 about these vampires. And at one point, there's a reference to Haunted Flaps, which really, really... that just ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? So yeah, maybe the Cheerleader is actually my favourite one. Sorry, I've really pulled the tarp. Sorry, Mum.
Not really sure how to follow Haunted Flaps. I'm going to ask a science question because obviously. You obviously took a lot of inspiration from people in the trees, and I saw huge similarities in the way that you've kind of, with the male characters, kind of the way they talk about the act of doing science, it almost doesn't really matter what it is they're actually doing, but the pursuit of doing it in the name of science, the name of knowledge, in the name of discovery, kind of trumps how ill-advised and the impact it has on other people. I wondered how you think about, I guess, quests for knowledge and kind of justification of science when you're writing about things like the body and how people find things out and so on and so forth.
That's a great question. Gemma Milne, author of Smoke and Mirrors, a great book about the science and hype around science. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because science and technology is often seen as kind of like amoral, like it has no moral element to it. You know, this is, why did we go to the moon? We went to the moon because we can, you know, this kind of thing. But increasingly, it isn't an amoral space. And again, we see this in people like Elon Musk. You know, should Jeff Bezos be able to take Captain Kirk to space for a little walk around when, you know, we have an environmental crisis here? Does it really affect it? You know, is it doing a different thing? So I think it's a very interesting kind of like present question. You know, is science justified in and of itself? Is technology justified in and of itself? But also it is really a historical question as well. So there are things that have happened, especially to minoritized people and minoritized bodies, which have been undoubtedly horrific. Like there is, has anyone heard of Henrietta Lacks? So Henrietta Lacks was a Black American woman, and she presented into a hospital, I think, with cancer, and they took a sample of her
Cervix.
Yes, cervical cancer, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
So they took a sample of this, and it became the first cell line that they managed to stabilize and then grow further and further cells. And it became like a huge kind of like, underpinning of like medical...
like vaccinations and everything.
Yeah.
It's still used like to this day.
Yeah, the HeLa, H-E-L-A cell line is still used to this day, but it was taken from her without her consent. And obviously that brings up a lot of questions about like the racial aspect of medicalization. And that was undoubtedly for humanity a good thing, but it was also completely non-consensual. And that's very problematic, and the way that her family hasn't benefited from this, but then it's also not financialized in the same way. So I'm really interested in these questions, and I don't think there is an easy answer to them necessarily. And I suppose that at the heart of this, it's like, how much good outweighs one person? And that's a really, really difficult question. That's like a fundamental philosophical question as well. You know, like we talk about hedonistic ethics, which is like anything is good if it causes more pleasure than it takes away more pain, but which is very simple, and philosophers love to be simple, and they love to go, well, it's just like this. But you pull out strands, and it's more difficult than that. So yeah, as a writer, it's a really interesting ground to play in, I think. And you can't ever really give an answer, which is good for your career because you can keep writing about it.
We're covering a lot of like subjects like philosophy, politics, geography. It's great.
Imagine being at my house, it's exhausting.
We've got another subject for you here. So Peach says, there's a lot to be said about masculinity in this book and the arrogance of this particular kind of masculinity. How did you manage to channel that so well?
Inside me, there are two men. I know a lot of men. I like some of them. No, I think there is a lot about masculinity in this book, and there's a lot about gender politics as well. Hopefully very different to the way R.L. Stine writes them. You know, the story is so obviously gendered. You know, this wouldn't have played out in the same way if it was a male patient and a female doctor. And I say this, and I'm not one of these people that thinks that, like, if we just replaced all of the cabinet with women, it'd be better, because look.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that women are inherently better than men. But I do think that there is a particular type of really, not pervasive, a really socially endorsed kind of toxic masculinity. And you know, it comes out, you think of things like pickup artists, you know, we're living through a time where you've got these like complete assholes on Twitter. I meant TikTok, but also Twitter. You know, these kind of like men who are basically telling other young men to treat women like shit.
Yeah.
It's really, I didn't imagine when I was younger that we would be at this point now. But this is a kind of recurring theme. You know, it's like on a cycle, the way that these men are kind of tolerated and then exalted. So yeah, I think he's a really masculine kind of archetype. And I guess the question that interests me most is, why do a certain type of men feel that they have control over women? And really, unfortunately, this is something that has become more relevant since I read the book, obviously with the Roe versus Wade overturning. You know, like why do they think they can control what happens to a woman's body? I feel very strongly about this, you know, like I just don't understand why we as a society have not moved past this idea that women should be in control of what's happening to their bodies.
Yeah.
That's not really an answer to that question, Peach, but it was a really great question.
Yeah, and your answer covers kind of what this book is talking about.
Yeah,
and like,
you read and find out more
you have
about
to
what
read
I think.
it. I think we have time for like one more question. Eli?
So you mentioned previously that you had written 2 other novels. What's happening with them? Are you going to release them?
I mean, I've written more than that now. I have written a second novel, which I will not speak of, because that's not, it's still in my secret little drawer. Novel writing is one of those things that you can only learn, you know this as a novelist, you can only learn by doing. So people can't tell you really how to write a novel, you can only learn how you write a novel while you do it, which means that you write one and it might not be that good. And my most hated, people hate when I say this as a piece of writing advice, but I think the best thing you can do is write a novel and throw it away. Because you can get obsessed with the idea of the first novel you've written, like this is the first novel I've written. And it traps you because you don't think you can write something else. And you will, and it will be better because you improve. So I think I must have written like 50,000 words of a novel when I was like in my mid-20s and then throw it away because I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, if I just write this many words, surely that'll be correct. It was not. And then I wrote a novel that was very much based on my time living in Latin America, but that was actually really different to my body of work, if you will. So I decided that wasn't going to be a correct novel for me to bring out. So I got an agent for that novel and then I pulled it kind of off the table. And then I wrote a first draft of a novel set on the West Coast, and then was really scared of that, so didn't look at it for 4 years, and then came back to it and was like, actually, I hate that. So yeah, this is kind of like the culmination of like all of those different strands and things and it coming together in what I hope is a cohesive kind of whole. But yeah, I really do think one of the best things you can do is write a novel and throw it away. And I'm sorry, people hate me saying that, honestly. If it's that good, you'll write it again. Right?
Good point. Yeah, sure. I'm there because I write as well, and I'm like, no.
The thing is, it's a lot of words, yeah, but there are loads of words.
That's very true. You can just pluck them out, put them in an order. It's great. Lovely. I think that's all we have time for. So thank you all again so much for coming and for joining us online. And a final huge congratulations.
Well, no, before you do that, a huge thank you to Rebecca for being a great interviewer.
And then my final enforced clap of the night is for Heather.